Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to our channel. If you're on YouTube, click the alert notification button, and if you like the video, please click like and share.
Welcome everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. This webinar is going to be on how to retain graduate hires, but we will be discussing employee retention in general and also touching on some mental health, well-being in the workplace and discussing that at the end of the webinar. So welcome, how to retain graduate hires. So as we know, today we are joined by Izzy, who is our partner and key account manager at Give a Grad a Go, and also Will, who's our key account manager at Give a Grad a Go. Izzy and Will both speak to hundreds of graduates all the time, possibly even thousands, I think I'm right in saying. So they definitely have a good knowledge of what graduates are looking for, what they're expecting, and what will keep them in a role, and also why this is highly beneficial to your business. So just as a really quick overview of what we're going to be discussing today, we will be touching on what is employee retention and what this means. We'll also then touch on why that's so important for your business. We're also going to go over after that some retention statistics. I know when I was looking at these statistics, I was really surprised that it shows just how important it is, and I thought they would be really good to share with you. We've got some secondary resources that we found statistically from other places, and we've also got our very own diversity and inclusion statistics that we've gathered recently. Then we're going to touch on some ways that you can actually implement these strategies in development and training plans before moving on, where Izzy's going to share with us a little bit more about how to manage mental health in the workplace. So I'll pass over to Will firstly. Thanks so much. So on our first thing, so what actually is employee retention?
Thank you very much, Katie. So, as mentioned, this is mainly going to be based around employee retention. And in some ways, it's quite simple. It's based on sort of the employee turnover and how many people are staying within your business. Now, they're not mutually exclusive, but it mainly refers to the ability to keep talent of employees within the company and reduce the amount of people that are leaving, whether it's planned, so people retiring or sort of going on maternity leave, something like that, or whether it's someone who's got a job offer elsewhere or has had to leave the business because they've been let go. So it kind of comes into two areas there, whether it's sort of planned or not. And within sort of the graduate area, we'll also be looking at sort of the stereotypes around graduates leaving their first job early, how this can be mitigated to prevent sort of high turnover within those sort of early stages as well. So we'll be looking at sort of how you can measure this to make sure they're actually going to be staying.
That's brilliant, thanks Will. So I'll move over with Izzy to the next slide, which is the importance of employer retention, why it is so good to focus on this and actually come up with some strategy for your business. So over to Izzy to explain a bit more.
Thanks, Katie. So yeah, a couple of points here. I guess if we jump into the impact on company morale, I think we all know that when we've got a new junior team member, we invest a lot of time in training them up, and it means that we're probably working extra hours to manage our workload and make sure they're happy. And then when somebody leaves, sometimes I think you can take it a little bit personally, and your mood and your morale filters through the office, and then suddenly everyone feels a little bit demotivated. And a lot of the time, graduates come in groups, and if they know that their colleague, their counterpart leaves, that's their confidant gone. That is the person that they can go and ask the smaller questions and they don't want to ask senior management. And suddenly you've got a team which aren't quite as motivated and happy as they once were. And this is a huge time cost, but also it's a big financial cost. Now, hopefully, if you're working with a recruiter, you should be covered by a rebate. I mean, we always provide a free replacement. But if you haven't, right, you're posting on job boards again, that's going to be a cost. The time cost, you need to explain to your client why you've got one less person working on a project, which probably means you're going to need to work overtime. And suddenly everything is racking up, and it's quite tricky to manage. And the other thing that you're looking at is your business reputation. Glassdoor is something that pretty much every single graduate will use now when looking at a company and deciding whether they want to work there. And it just takes one negative review to make them question about what is this culture like? Do I want to work there? And the problem is, once one negative review is left, you can kind of start a bit of a snowball effect, because anyone that's enjoying their job is very unlikely to say, yeah, I really like it. But if you're not enjoying it, you're probably more likely to leave a bad review, and suddenly your company isn't being represented in the light it should, and the way that your company actually is. And this ultimately, it's seen as unattractive. I don't think anybody wants to work somewhere where they feel like there's a bit of a revolving door, and that the top talent isn't developing. You can't see sort of a clear journey from somebody starting and being in the company for a number of years. So those are the risks associated with not being able to keep your talent engaged and there for a long time. Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Izzy. So I guess now we'll look at some statistics to sort of follow on from what Izzy was saying, and actually see, in I guess a more numerical way, how this actually is impacting businesses at the moment. So Will, over to you to discuss some of the current statistics that we found online and through our research.
Definitely. So I guess this is just a bit of a snapshot of how sort of employees react to the market. I think obviously at the moment, due to COVID and the effect that it's had on the labour market, it's probably quite different. I think, employees are going to be holding on to their jobs a lot more strongly, because they might not want to risk going out into the job market at the moment. But it costs an average of 33% of an employee's annual salary if they actually leave a role. Now, someone's probably thinking, a third, Christ, that's quite high. But if you think about it, someone in a graduate role, when they're leaving, the amount of training and onboarding that has to go into the process to get them ready to enter the workforce from senior figureheads within the business really probably makes up a large proportion of that. If you've got the head of people, if you've got a account director spending a lot of time with a candidate as they're joining, their salaries are going to be a lot higher. The value they can add to the business in terms of revenue elsewhere, revenue generating streams, is going to be all put into onboarding a candidate, which is vital. But if that person leaves, it can have sort of a large effect, and it can cost a lot more than the initial hiring process, depending on how long these processes go on for. In terms of sort of some stats which I thought were quite surprising, an employee is 4 times more likely to quit if they don't feel recognised. I mean, I think it's not surprising that if someone doesn't feel valued within a workforce that they would look to leave, but 4 times more likely, I probably wouldn't have sort of realised that. And you can mitigate against this happening by having a clear onboarding process, really defining how a candidate's journey looks within the business once they actually join, having clear milestones, I think even just leading up to someone's probation, having meetings in advance of that to ensure that they actually know how they're doing. We speak to a lot of candidates that are coming up to their probation period who don't feel valued, who don't know if they're going to pass. And because of that, they're just instinctively going to look to protect their own back and look elsewhere. That can have a really negative effect if you're planning to keep them on board and they just don't know it. This can quite often happen with temporary contracts that are designed to go permanent as well. So it's all about making sure that there's a clear communication between the candidates, the hiring managers, the head of people, and all the different sort of teams that are involved. And this goes on to sort of promotions and career path. 54% of employees aren't clear about the direction of their career path. I know that at Give a Grad a Go, and a lot of the roles that I personally work on, because a lot of them are sales-based roles, we have really clear milestones of how you can achieve that next promotion, whether it's signing up a certain number of clients, hitting a certain number of revenue. The clearer you can make it to a candidate about what's expected them to hit their next promotion, the happier they'll be. It just creates a better atmosphere for people if they know what they're working towards. If it's a non-sales based role where you don't have specific KPIs to work to, you could even do this on a time scale, on a certain type of project they're working on. If they hit certain criteria, then they know they'll be progressing. One limitation we see is when companies overpromise what a candidate can achieve. They can say in 6 months you'll get a promotion, when in reality people are waiting 9 to 12 months in the existing teams before they're actually unlocking those next promotions. In terms of some of the other stats, companies that support remote work have a 25% lower unemployment turnover. Obviously, that one's going to probably be a statistic that we'll come back to next year when we actually know how the work from home environment's changed. Within that, obviously, there are difficulties for graduates, and not all of them have had exposure to the workplace. So that's where your onboarding process comes in, to make sure that they're supported in an environment where they don't have their peers, where they don't have other people to check in on them. Working from home can be quite a daunting thing if you're doing it for the first time. So making sure you have that onboarding process can really help there as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Will. So these stats are what we've gathered from a range of research that have been taken from other people's studies, but we have actually been conducting some primary research ourselves and looking specifically at equality and inclusion in the workplace. And the reason why we wanted to share this today is because quite a lot of our results that we found here suggest that employees, in particularly graduates as well, that we've been interviewing, value equality and inclusion so highly in the workplace that this is something that could actually make them want to leave a company or not join your company at all in the first place. So I'll pass back over to Will to explain a little bit more about this and talk over some of our findings.
Definitely. So this is a study that was conducted. I believe we've had over 1,000 candidates who have responded to this and submitted their data. So we think it's a really good sort of snapshot of the current market. This was done about a month or two ago, so it's really fresh information as well, and takes sort of current climate into account. And sort of some of the key findings that we found when it comes to having an inclusive workspace, equal salary for similar positions was kind of like the top of the agenda for all candidates. 67.5% of candidates said that was really important for them. I've worked in recruitment now for 3 years. I've heard stories from where two candidates for an entry-level job on a salary bracket of, let's say, 20 to 25k, two candidates of the same experience, same education, have been offered different salaries because one was a male and one was a female. And when challenged, often clients haven't even thought about what they've done. They've just said, well, the one asked for the higher. And that's because instinctively men will ask for a higher salary than women. And there are studies that have kind of shown that. So there are things that you can do to make sure that you're being really clear and transparent about the salaries of different roles. I think sometimes having a flat salary for a position is the best thing you can do. So what we have at Give a Grad a Go, each promotion you get, you go onto a flat salary. So between the account managers, we're all on the same, between the recruiters, the resources, each position has the same salary. So you don't have awkward kitchen talk where someone finds out they're being paid more or less than someone else, because that can be hugely demoralizing to find out that you're doing the same job as someone but earning a lot less due to reasons completely out of your control. And that can happen across all different areas, from race to religion to gender. There are loads of different things. So whatever you can do to create a level playing field for all staff members, that's going to promote retention, because people are going to feel valued for the work they're doing rather than just for the deal they struck the day they signed the contract. Some other areas that you can do, candidates clearly have felt overlooked for certain positions and certain companies based on discrimination. Now, as you can see in the stats, this is for various different reasons, and making sure that you have an unbiased process during your interview stages can help with retention as well, because you're hiring the best people for the right reasons, rather than, I think there was an article I read on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about people hiring to create a more diverse workplace, but they are hiring what's called sort of token candidates, people that were being hired not because they were the best for the job, but just because they fit a certain bracket. Now, if you're hiring someone just to meet a quota that you might have set to try and make yourself seem more diverse, that candidate isn't going to feel valued. They're going to feel that they're there for the wrong reasons, and they won't enjoy the work environment. It can be quite clear when someone's been hired for those reasons, and it will create a really bad atmosphere for them, a bad reputation within the industry that you're working in with as well. Izzy, Katie, were there any other bits you wanted to add to the diversity inclusion?
Well, we've had a lot of great feedback from this survey and sharing it around with our clients, so I hope that what Will's explained to everyone has been really useful today. And if you do want to find out more, I guess what I would like to add here is that we will be doing two actually diversity and inclusion webinars coming up in January. So if you are interested in that, our emails will be at the end of the slide, so please do get in touch. And we do also have the link coming up later for the full document of this with all of our findings in there as well.
Definitely. And just within that, actually, one bit that I forgot to mention there at the bottom is the mentoring schemes and regular feedback. That is something that is hugely important. It's something that we have at Give a Grad a Go. We get teamed up with a junior staff member and we can support them in their growth, their progression. We can provide them advice and support that someone senior up within the business might not be able to do in a more informal manner. Often, if you have a concern or a reservation about your current role, you won't be willing to speak to your line manager about it. You won't want to speak to the managing director because you don't know if you'll be heard in the correct manner. Maybe they'll take it out of context. Maybe it's a small quibble that you don't necessarily know if you have the right to say because you're so junior. What I've often found with the person that I mentor is whatever they come and tell me, I'll treat it with the utmost sort of confidence, respect, but I'll always try and, where I can, raise those concerns with the managers, with my line manager, our managing director, because I don't care if I annoy our CEO or our MD asking about a small thing, because, you know, if it helps someone else more junior, it's going to help the business as a whole. So having a mentor can be really beneficial, providing help and support. It can help plan out an individual's career, help define how they grow within a business, and just give them the confidence to succeed. So I know for retention, that's something that's worked really well. And I know that since we put in those mentoring places, the employees that we have that have gone through those have become absolute high flyers.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, and we'll kind of come on to this in the next slide too, those mentor schemes are so good to have quite a big structure around as well. I know I've sort of always think, oh, if there's a problem or anything, I know working at Give a Grad a Go that I can bring that up in the next meeting. It's all scheduled, it's all there. I always feel as though there's the opportunity to share that feedback. I think personally that's something that I really enjoy and would say is a massive positive impact on employees that I found from my experience. I don't know about you, Izzy.
Absolutely, it's so important, and we can go on to that a little bit, I think, in the next slide, which actually brings us probably quite nicely. So the next slide, it's I guess it falls under a lot of these, but it's making your team feel valued. So whether that's setting aside time for them, if you're having a weekly sit down, you keep that weekly sit down. I think a lot of the time managers can feel like they're here, there, everywhere. And it's easy to think, oh, I'll just push that person's to a couple of days back. I mean, I know they're doing really well, but that's that candidate, that's your team member's time. And that's the time where they can raise questions, raise problems, or just have a general feedback catch-up session. And so you want to make sure you're treating that really seriously, and you're always keeping to your commitments there. And it doesn't always have to be a formal sit down either. It can be recognition. So when, especially the junior team, when they're doing really well or they've done a great bit of work for a client, the client won't necessarily have direct contact with them. So you can't say, oh, you did a great job directly. So it's your job as a team lead, as a manager, whatever, to say thank you so much in front of the team, or just dropping through an email. It doesn't need to be in a big award ceremony, but it makes the world of difference. And another point is investing in training. I think that is something, well, I know that's something that graduates put really high up on their priorities list, and knowing that their employer wants to invest in their well-being and their abilities as a young professional. So you might put some ownership onto them and say, listen, we're all going to give everyone a budget. What do you want to do that's going to benefit you and the wider business as a whole? And you're buying people in. They want to do the qualifications, they want to better themselves, but they also want to contribute to the company. And that links in nicely with establishing goals together. Where do they want to be in a week's time, a month's time, 6 months, a year's time? Working on that together makes such a huge difference, because you're able to sort of tick off each rung as you go along, saying, right, you've done this, what's the next goal? And people always stay around when they can see what their future might look like. And I think Will brought this up. I think we've done really well in investing a lot of time on job specs. So when someone's promoted, you can say, oh, great, they've achieved their goal. But actually, what does their next goal look like? Are you making sure that you're giving them a job spec, the documentation, to understand what they need to do to get to that next level? And I think it's quite easy for us as managers to say, right, well, you've got the promotion, you'll be fine for 6 months. We need to be really on it in making sure that with each promotion, they're understanding what their responsibilities are, and what they need to do to continue to move up throughout their career. And I think as well, it's making sure that you're delegating effectively. You're not just giving the jobs that you don't really want to do, the painful administrative tasks which take quite a lot of time but need doing. You're actually giving something which is challenging, enjoyable, that needs to be done, and that your team can see that you want them to be a partner with you, rather than you're just doing the bits that you don't necessarily want to do. And that links in really nicely with giving ownership. I think the responsibility is sort of much of a muchness, in my opinion. I mean, what do you two think? Would you agree?
Most definitely. I think from being a team lead myself, one thing that I found when I was originally working underneath someone, the worst thing is, as you said, you just get given the task that someone else doesn't want to do, that either they think they're too good for, or that isn't worth their time. And a lot of they're really repetitive, mundane, boring tasks. They're not intellectually stimulating. You don't learn anything. You just feel like you're being given this because their time is more valuable than yours. That might be the case, but if this is part of their job, you shouldn't just be cleaning up after them and doing their mess. So one thing that I always try and do when I'm working with a project with my consultant is I'll try and figure out, right, what haven't they had an opportunity to do so far that I would normally do? We'll have an open, honest discussion about what value they want to learn. You know, what part of the recruitment process haven't they been exposed to? Would they like to be involved in more? A really simple thing that our management started getting us to do was have the individuals in our team involved in every single client email, so they can see all the different ways that we engage with our different clients, whether it's a positive response from the client, whether it's a negative response, and we're having to push back, or we're having to solve an issue with the candidate, with the sort of employee being involved in these different processes. They learn a lot. And I think a lot of what you can do to engage with people and create sort of long-term retention is by having that consistent learning. As Izzy touched upon, investing in training opportunities. Candidates prefer having learning and development over salary. People will choose to have a learning and development budget, training and progression, compared to just having a higher salary where they might be more stagnant. I think a lot of people see that within the contracting world, and they'll move away from contracting for a more established career where they can actually grow, learn and develop.
Yeah, I completely echo what you're saying, Will. I've been very fortunate in my time, especially at Give a Grad a Go, to have been given the responsibilities. And I think this webinar is the perfect example of one. My manager said, if you'd like to do it, go ahead. And I think giving that responsibility to whoever you're mentoring or tutoring, or whoever sits underneath you status-wise, that also builds a lot of trust in your relationship. And I think when you've got that trust and that rapport with the people you're working with, that is a massive benefactor in having people stay with you in your team and in your company. And I just think that is so important, and that it's easy to be overlooked, having those relationships. So yeah, I completely agree. And I think having that responsibility and trust with yourself and the people that you're working with, and allowing them to do something and make their own mistakes, is really beneficial.
Yeah.
And just before we switch over the slide, there was one more point I wanted to add, actually, which I think is quite an important one. When it comes to kind of like turnover within the first year of employment, especially, I think a lot of it can be down to poor recruitment processes and decision-making processes. And what that often comes down to is the kind of like employee blaming the employer and the employer blaming the employee. This is often due to a poorly designed or sort of introduction to the business, poor job specifications, not clear on what someone's responsibilities are going to be. A client or a candidate can be oversold or undersold on their sort of skill sets, what the role's responsibilities are going to be. So having a really clear, honest job specification, really honest interview process about what someone's role will actually entail, the progression that they're going to achieve, the salary, the OTE. There's nothing worse than when you have a new client who says a candidate's going to earn £110,000 in their first year, but in reality, one person earned that 4 years ago, and they're now the sales manager, and nobody's ever done it since. So I think if you can be open and honest from the upfront, and people have a clear expectation of what they're going to be coming into and doing, I think you already start mitigating against the risk of losing people because they know what's expected of them. It's much harder to blame someone for a job that was falsely advertised if you have been open and honest. And I know recruitment is notoriously bad for when they're hiring directly to tell people that their role is going to be different to what it actually is. I hear so many candidates that leave recruitment because they were promised one thing compared to another thing. And I know it goes on in other industries, but I think just having a really clear, transparent recruitment process with total honesty can really help you with your sort of retention rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, like, it's good to find out, speak to your staff, speak to employees, find out what they want to do, and don't underestimate the value of giving them projects instead of necessarily a pay rise, because that can be just as beneficial. As long as it's something that they are definitely interested in, something they are wanting to do, then that can be as valuable in the retention strategy as just giving a simple pay rise. And I think that will also massively boost the morale because they'll feel more expected, which kind of leads us onto our next slide, which is really important, having that mental and emotional well-being in the workplace, which I'll pass over to Izzy to explain a little bit more on.
Yeah, and just jumping back very quickly to the last slide, I think you can also have various software and platforms where you can do anonymous internal surveys, and this links nicely with this, that you can do it with the mental health theme, but also you can do it with general managers. How do you feel appreciated? Do you feel supported? I think we've seen that mental health has been at the forefront of many discussions, which is brilliant, because I think it was something a number of years ago people didn't really want to address. The fact of the matter is we all have mental health, every single one of us, and so we need to make sure that our teams are supported when 1 in 4 of us will experience and suffer from poor mental health. So I think it's very important that we all go away and think about what can we do as a business to make sure that our team feel valued and feel supported. And it's something that I know a lot of candidates will now ask at interview stage, what are you doing? And you want to be able to answer confidently and say, okay, these are the steps and methods we've put into place. My advice would be invest in a mental health ambassador or first aider. It doesn't mean you need to have someone who's fully qualified as a psychiatrist or anything like that on site. It's purely somebody who's able to offer the right channels of support. So you could look at somebody from the people team, someone from the ops team. I'd personally avoid somebody who has a lot of people reporting into them, because it can be quite tricky to go to your manager and say, I'm struggling with this, and it be completely squashed into, it's obviously a work matter, when actually it might be something totally separate. It might be actually, no, I need these implemented for me to manage my workload at the moment. It's really inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. I know St. John's do a course, loads of companies do courses actually, and I think it's something like £200 to have somebody to become fully qualified as a first aider. The other thing that I'd look at, and if there's a budget there, and it's a great thing to invest in, is an external consultant. Charlotte Wiseman has actually done webinars before for us, and she's fantastic. It doesn't have to be her, but I just know her work, and she helps on courses like mental resilience, well-being in the work, how you manage as a manager somebody in your team who is struggling, because it, let's let's face it, it's going to be part of our daily life. I imagine probably all know somebody in our team or in the wider business who might be struggling, and I think we have a duty to a certain extent to make sure that we are looking after our team, and those are the kind of initiatives that keep people bought in and keep people staying in a company, because they know that you're going to support them at their best, but you're also going to support them when they're not feeling quite so capable. And it's something that I would advise all businesses to look into at the very least. Thanks.
I completely agree. Thanks so much for sharing that, Izzy. So I'm conscious that our time, we are coming to the end of the webinar already. It feels like it's gone so quickly. So I'll quickly just go over some of our partnerships and opportunities that we've got at the moment. As Izzy mentioned, we have done some webinars with Charlotte Wiseman, which you can watch the full clip on YouTube. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can find it on there. And if anyone can't, please drop me an email at k.clough@giveagradago.com and I can send it over to you. We also have a referral scheme at the moment. So if you have recently placed a hire with us, get in touch and I'll give you the details, where we're offering £250 either for yourselves, split between you and your referred company, or for our chosen charity, which is WizKids. But for more information, please drop me an email and I can send you the full list. We've also got, as I mentioned earlier, more employer webinars coming up in January, and our next one will be on diversity and inclusion, and we're going to be joined by Pink News, who is an online newspaper specifically targeted towards the LGBTQ+ community, and they've done a lot of work on the importance of that in the workplace specifically, and we actually have spoken on one of their webinars in the past month. And we'll also be joined by Diversifying, who are a company that we've been working with to learn how we can go about ourselves as a business, but also you can learn from them as well on how to be more diverse in the workplace. So they'll be joining us for that. And for the full report of what we looked at earlier, please scan that QR code. I guess if anyone's got any questions in this time, please do let us know. We've got a bit of an open discussion. But also if there's anything else that you can think of that sort of springs to mind after this webinar, please do not hesitate to get in touch, because we'd love to engage more with all of you. So thank you so much.
There was a point I wanted to jump in on really quickly, which I forgot to mention, and it's investigating why people leave. It's something that the kind of like retention process sometimes gets missed out on, and it's people think the day a notice is handed in that's it, it's over, when in reality it's not. You need to be finding out the reasons why someone's leaving, and this can be done in sort of a closed forum, in the sense that you have an exit interview. I don't know if every business does this, but I think it's really crucial that you're finding out in an open, honest dialogue why someone's leaving the business. And it should never be the line manager who's actually conducting this. It needs to be someone who's impartial, someone that they can have an honest conversation with and really explain why they might be leaving, whether it's the structure, whether there's micromanagement, whether they didn't feel comfortable with the current teams. The amount of information you find out about a business by being able to have a conversation with someone when they're leaving is always going to be more valuable than if you sit down with an existing team structure, because all those little quibbles that someone builds up over the year or however many months they've been there, they can openly talk about, and it can enact really strong change within a business, because things that management might overlook can then be addressed, and that can actually increase the retention rates when things are changed for the people that are currently in the role. And then also the person leaving will always feel better that their voice has been heard, and they're not just leaving everyone else in a situation that could be, or an environment that they've seen as toxic. It can really help change the environment for the better. So that's definitely something that's worth you doing. There are companies that do run exit interviews independently, or you can have someone within your team who doesn't sort of directly report to that individual, so they can have an open conversation about sort of about their time and why they might be leaving the role.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Do you have anything else to mention, Izzy, before we wrap things up? I think
no, I'm mindful that we're a little bit over. But our emails are on there, so if there are any questions, obviously more than happy to jump on there or even have a call. But I am conscious only a little bit over, but everyone may be wanting to go grab some lunch. But
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us. It's been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's joined today. And yeah, to echo what Izzy said, please do get in touch if there's anything at all that you'd like to discuss further. And we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you at our next webinars in January, if not before. And if we don't speak to you, have a great Christmas and New Year.